staple of the format. And so you do see a lot of people just coming back to it over time, or a lot of newer players also jumping on it too.
Yeah, that's a lot of people that do play Burn. I've noticed that they always keep it, right? So a lot of the times, a lot of the times, you know, like you'll have a deck. And then you'll be like, oh, this is really cool. And then you'll jump onto a new one. You'll like disassemble, sell the old one, do whatever. But for a lot of people like that play Burn, they're just like, even if they jump to a new deck, they're like, yeah, I still have Burn. And then like every once in a while, I'll come back to it and I'll pull it out. So it's like, I don't know, it's just like it never becomes a bad deck. And people who, especially people who start with it, they just always have a soft place in their heart.
Yeah, it's like riding a bike, you know. It's like you play Burn for a while, you learn how to play it. And like we talked about before, I think it was last week or the week before, like, so it is a deck that has a low floor, so like new players can play it. But like there's a lot of people that can win big tournaments with it, and it does sometimes require a lot of decision making and good skill. So it has a decent ceiling as well. Dustin, I'm sure here could explain Titanshift for you guys.
Sure, Titanshift. The namesake of the card or the deck, sorry, is the two cards, Scapeshift and Primeval Titan. So Primeval Titan is a very big man. He's, I believe, a 6 mana, and when he enters the battlefield or attacks, you get 2 of any land and put it onto the battlefield. And Scapeshift says 4 mana, sorcery, sack any number of lands, and then put that many lands from your library onto the battlefield. So the way the deck mostly works, it has a Amulet of Vigor, I believe. It's a 1-mana artifact that says if something would come into the battlefield tapped, it comes into the battlefield untapped instead. And then... Huh?
That's Amulet.
Oh, I'm being informed that that is a completely different deck. Oh, this is just a Scapeshift deck with Titan in it. I am very sorry. So this is basically just a regular Scapeshift deck, if anybody knows what that is. So, like I said, Scapeshift, you go search for, you sacrifice your lands and then search for other lands. And the way it wins is that it plays a land card called Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. And it says, while it's on the battlefield, if you control, or when a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 5 other mountains, it deals 3 damage to a target. And so what you do is that you get like 6 or so lands, and then you cast Scapeshift, sacrifice all of them, get 1 or 2 Valakuts, and then the rest mountains, and then you just like deal like 18 to 22 damage to your opponent.
All right, let's get caught up here with what's going on here on the board state. We got Brad's got an Eidolon of Revel here, and
yep. So Brandon here is just doing his game plan. He's ramping. He suspended a Search for Tomorrow on 1. Which had 2 counters on it and eventually allowed him to get a basic land. And then he played Sakura Tribe Elder, also known as Steve. And
that's one of the notable nicknames there.
Yep, they're always like super common too, super common names. But it's a 2-mana 1/1 that says at any time you can sacrifice it and search for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped.
Some of the nicknames for some of the cards are like based on like if they did art of the players too, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Because like for anybody in chat doesn't know, like I don't think they do it anymore, but they used to, like if you won like Worlds or something, wasn't it?
It was like Worlds, or there was like another tournament too.
Yeah, some kind of one of the bigger tournaments in the past, invitationals or something. They would like put your the player into the art. So if you look at like the original Snapcaster Mage, or what other one, Meddling Mage,
Dark Confidant, obviously.
Dark Confidant, those are actual players in the art, like the first arts I think for them.
Yeah. They would.
Super cool.
Yeah, whenever they'd say, "Hey, we're gonna make a new card and we're gonna put your face on it."
Yeah, it's awesome. I don't think they do it anymore though, right? No,
no, I don't think so. So Brandon here has a Valakut on the battlefield already. He doesn't have enough mountains to trigger it, but he might not need Scapeshift. His opponent is kind of putting him under a lot of pressure, but he might be able to... and Scapeshift, I didn't mention this. Scapeshift says any number, so when you sacrifice lands, you don't have to sacrifice all of them. So you can sacrifice everything but your Valakuts, and then when all your mountains come in, they all technically are on the battlefield at the same time, so they all trigger.
Yeah, Brad here just was able to hit him with lethal.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Valakut, we got to see that deck last. We got to see Valakut in action last week. Do some damage. All right, so let's go over the sideboards here. Brandon's got 2 Ancient Grudges, 1 Seal of Primordial, 2 Grafted Digger Sage, 1 Dampening Sphere, 1 Alpine Moon, 2 Thragtusk, 3 Tireless Trackers, 1 Xenagos, 1 Anger Gods, 1 Blasphemous. Actually, you know what? I think this is Brandon from last week, actually, because his sideboard looks exactly the same. What do you like here, Dustin?
Obviously, Thragtusk is pretty big work. It's 5 mana, which is a lot, and this isn't exactly like the fastest ramp deck. It's not like Ponza where you can have like 4 mana on turn 2, but it's a little more consistently. But Burn also isn't like a set up a combo, kill you on turn 3. It's like kill you on turn like 4 or 5, like consistently every single time.
Okay.
So he might live, and then gaining 5 life is huge. Like 5 life is a lot, and then having a 5/3 is a pretty big game against any of his creatures. And then if he tries to answer, he's gonna get a 3/3 beast for his troubles. Other than that, I don't really see anything else that's gonna really help him in the matchup.
So this is actually kind of like similar to the matchup that we saw, which was Burn and Ponza.
Yeah.
Not that far off, kind of.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. The only creature, or the only card in the sideboard that really makes a difference is the one that gains life. I could also see the Anger of the Gods come in like it did in the Ponza matchup. Again, though, like in the Ponza matchup, sometimes it's just dead in your hand. But if he has something that he's willing to take out that's worse, then it could definitely come in.
And if he's bringing in, like, I don't know if he is, but like if he is bringing in these smaller creatures like the Tireless Tracker and stuff, like, again, like, he might end up in the same position that we saw the Ponza player in, where he was like, oh, no, like, I have this Anger of the Gods, but I have, like, 2 good creatures on board also.
The thing about Titanshift is that they don't really, the only, like, small creatures they play is, like, Sakura Tribe Elder, which they just sack anyway.
Yeah.
So they're really having, like, a super low opportunity cost. They're, like, never blowing up their own creatures. Like, the only creature, like, actual creature that they care about sticking is Primeval Titan. And
look at that.
That thing will not die to Anger. So
all right, let's see what Brad's got here. So we got 2 Deflecting Palms, 4 Destructive Rev, 2 Exquisite Firecrafts, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Ensnaring Bridge, and 3 Searing Bloods. What do you like here?
Okay, so Ensnaring Bridge is big game, and Deflecting Palm is really big game. Okay. So I don't know if no. Okay, so Titanshift isn't running the Amulet Titan combo, which allows him to like one-shot somebody, which would like with Deflecting Palm obviously like turn it back on him. So Ensnaring Bridge is really good against obviously just Titan itself. Just being a 6/6 is like sometimes enough, and if he's bringing in Thragtusk, the 5/3 is pretty good. So Ensnaring Bridge will keep them from attacking back. It doesn't stop his Valakut combo though, so he might decide to not do that. But Deflecting Palm's pretty good against again the Titan, and it can only deflect 1 trigger of Valakut because each trigger is separate.
Gotcha.
So
tell us what Deflecting Palm is, just for guys in chat, because maybe we could see if I think Andrew's actually about to bring up Deflecting Palm here in a second.
Yep, it's 2 mana, 1 red, 1 white for an instant, and it says the next time target source would deal damage to you. Here we go. Next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent it, and if it's prevented, you deal that much damage to its source's controller. So you basically get to take the damage and reflect it back.
This is a card I've always liked so much that you just like. I always feel like it doesn't get to see enough play, and it's like, you know, obviously it probably sees the exact amount of play it's supposed to, but like I've had a personal liking for it in general. Yeah. But it's so cool when you get to use it against like an Emrakul.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, for sure.
You just like Emrakul attacks, like you just you tap all your mana and then sack all your stuff, and then you just Deflecting Palm them, because why can you use it against Emrakul? It does not target. It just says
choice
anything, so it doesn't matter. It's a sweet card. That's like one of the best wordings on it, is that like it can actually
it doesn't say like target source, it just says source of your choice. So another big thing that it's good against is like the combo-y Death Shadow decks that like try to like double strike Death Shadow, and you're just like Deflecting Palm, and like it doesn't hit both because it's 2 separate sources of damage. It's first strike, but like it'll be like, oh, I'm gonna 10-10 double strike you, and you're like, okay, well I'll take 10 and you take 10.
Yep. So we got a classic start here from Brad. Brad's bringing in a Goblin Guide. So for people that don't know, tell us why Goblin Guide is good.
So Goblin Guide is one of the pretty much best costed aggressive creatures ever printed, which is why it's still used. It's 1 mana, 2/2 haste. So it just gets on the board really quick and starts dealing damage. It does have a downside, which is whenever it attacks, your opponent reveals the top card of their library, and if it's a land, they draw it.
But there's also a good thing about that.
You know the top card of their deck.
That's right. So then what is it mainly good because it lets you know what deck they're on, or is it good because then you get to see what they're about to take?
Both.
Okay.
So unless they take a land, obviously. I mean, you obviously know that they have a land in hand, but like, so it is a little bit deeper than just normal, where yeah, it's aggressive and it does the damage, which is what you want it to do, but it also kind of helps you see some things, like especially like you said, in the dark, and when they just like flip something like random, you're just like, oh, like I know what deck you're on now, and I can kind of warp my next couple plays.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the weird things about Burn is like we've talked about in previous weeks here, great deck for beginners. And one of the interesting things is there's a lot of actual budget styles for it, which it's already a pretty affordable deck as it is.
Yep.
But one thing that's like a huge fight over the deck is like there's very specific room for these like one-drop creatures, and that's why we've even seen like cards like the what's the Hate Bear Devil card, Vexing Devil, like not make it in, even though that card would seem like it would be great. Like it's because like there's only enough room for like these specific amount of creatures in here, and they all kind of look like they're similar power, but they're really not, right? Like they
yeah, so some of them are like give you slight advantages that newer players might not get. So like we were talking about, the Goblin Guide, you know, might give you a little bit more information, whereas Vexing Devil, they just like take 4 and you're like whatever. Vexing Devil though is like a good budget option because Goblin Guides are decently expensive. So I've seen it before where they run those instead, but Goblin Guide is just probably far and away the best one drop. You could argue that Monster Swift Spear, because it gets bigger, but just like for the value, you just like fire and forget, you know?
And I think one thing that we're seeing right now, even in this game, is just like getting a creature on board that has haste like immediately in the beginning of the game is like a huge, like you talked about, like one thing in Modern that's important is being able to put the pressure on, and like that these creatures represent like just like a constant pressure if your opponent can't interact.
Yep. Right? It makes it so so like they have to try to manage their resources to deal with this constant damage, and it allows them to, or it like kind of makes it so they have to choose between dealing with your onboard presence or your hand presence, and neither is good to like leave the other.
We see Brad here putting an Eidolon. Also, by the way, so just to catch you guys up with this game, Rift Bolt on the stack, or not on the stack, it was suspended. And then Brad also played the Eidolon. Eidolon Rhetoric, basically going to just, you know, constantly tax your opponent for any small mana costing cards that they cast. And now Brandon, just a pretty good little turn there, just cleaning up Brad's board state.
Yeah, for those who don't know, because it's a less played card, the thing he had on the board before, the other green card, was Seal of Primordium. 2 mana, enchantment. It just enters the battlefield, does nothing, but you can sacrifice it to destroy a target enchantment. Okay. And Eidolon of the Great Revel is an enchantment creature.
Yep.
So it's a little tech against that some people might not just like immediately like, because you're like, oh, enchantment creature, like that's weird. But yeah, so he was able to do that and then cast Lightning Bolt to kill his other creature. So the onboard pressure has been dealt with, but like we said, you know, Burn just can also pressure you from their hand.
Now, Eidolon of the Rhetoric, if it's in the... Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to do... Anyways, Eidolon of the Great Revel, if it's in the graveyard, is that now counting for like if a Termagoyf was on board? Yeah.
Yep, that is a super type. So it technically counts as an enchantment as well. Just like as an artifact creature would count for artifact and creature.
Very cool. That was the Theros block. It had a bunch of the enchantment creatures, right?
Yep. Oh, and back to Lulian Bender. Vexing Devil, has anyone ever tried Pelt Collector as them? Oh, yeah. Okay, we have that answered already. So, yeah, we had. I definitely saw at least one player play it last week.
Yeah, I liked that deck. Yeah, I thought that was cool. We got to see some good games last week with that. Thank you, by the way, for Dan. That's one of our other tech guys here for linking that up.
Yep. So right now, we got. It seems like Brandon is pretty close to trying to go off. I can't really tell. I believe Scapeshift is double green. So he's actually looking for his second green source here.
Yep.
But it seems like he could, but he's almost dead now. So if Brad has 1 card left in hand, ooh, that's big. So this is Thragtusk. He's going to gain 5 life off of this and really put himself out of reach off of a top deck.
So yeah, I mean, Brad would have liked to have that had a Skullcracker or something, obviously.
Yep, just like in the last game, last match. But it seems he didn't have it. He's on 4 lands, which is really not where Burn wants to be. and really you want to be on like 2, 3 at the most. He just has like a Swiss Spear here, which does almost nothing. It does get bigger, so if he just has a spell in hand and then draws another one, he could potentially trade with this Thragtusk. But that's still not good, because he's going to get a 3/3, which is going to pressure Brad. He's still at a pretty high life total, but if he just doesn't find an answer, he could just straight up die to it. Oh, okay, so we have a Brandon Keston Summoning Pact here. For those who don't know, the packs were a cycle of cards, one in each color, that were 0 mana for, and what they all had an effect. The green one here says search your library for a creature, put it into your hand, and then they all say at the beginning of your next upkeep, pay a cost of whatever color they are. Summoning Pact, I believe, is 2 green, or lose the game.
So what do you think then? So is Brandon? He's obviously going to be restabilized here without a problem then.
Yeah,
like, right?
So he just like had a really big 2 turns where he cast Thragtusk and then is able to get a second Thragtusk, cast it, and also play his second green source tapped. So now at this point, he is very much out of burn range.
And it looks like he has another Summoning Pack in hand. If I saw, he flashed his hand for a second. It looked like he might.
Yeah, I think he only had 2 Thragtusk in the sideboard, but he could go get a Primeval Titan, which would just like help him turn his game around and put a huge clock on him. Okay, so he just paid for the upkeep cost of Summoner's Pact. But now he's also in a position where, like, next turn and onwards, if he draws a Scapeshift, he can just win the game on the spot.
Yeah, and I see he's got a Bolt in hand, too, so that's going to come into account for, like, damage to the face.
Yep.
Looks like he's probably got this game in...
yeah, it's...
We're going to go to a game 3.
Yep, this is one of the things that Burn does. It kind of just, like, runs out of steam. So, which is why, like, Skullcrack is such a big game, and, like, having life gain cards in your sideboard is a game, because... having enough velocity to get to 20 is already kind of difficult, and then when you're gaining 5 or 10 life in this case, like, it almost becomes impossible.
Gotcha. So Brad's going to be on the play here, which is pretty huge for Burn, right?
Normally, if you're going against another deck that's kind of quicker, but I think Titanshift is slow enough where he's still not in a good position even being on the play.
Okay. Real quick, hey Ben Sabbath, are you still in chat? I was going to ask you what it's if you play it in Brazil and what it's like over there. If you just if you play at a store in Brazil or anything, just let us know. Kind of curious about that. Really cool. Again, have all you guys in chat. Thanks, guys. This is our 3rd week doing it now. We're GameStorm Gaming out of Lamont, and yeah, we're just a suburb 15 miles south or 15 miles west of Chicago. And we're going to be doing Modern here every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. Thank you guys again, everybody who's in here and everybody who's returning.
7 o'clock Central.
Yeah, 7 o'clock Central time.
Yep.
So, yeah. So far, every week, we've been getting a little bit of our expert analyses here. Have been changing up a little bit. But this week, we have Dustin with us. He's doing a great job. So, yeah, it's been going smooth so far. And if you guys have any questions, like the last couple weeks, like chat's been asking us so many good interactive questions. Like, go ahead and ask us anything, guys. Like anything you want to know about Modern, or like I know a little bit about some of the other formats too, and I'm sure Dustin here knows a little bit about some of the other formats.
Yep.
So we're like more than happy to talk about like new cards, or if you guys have just like goofy questions about Magic, or if you guys want to talk about some like hype, like earlier we were talking about the new EMA cards that were just spoiled. Just like feel free to say whatever you guys want in chat, and like we'll talk about it in between games or during games, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. We're always up for interacting with you guys.
So yeah, so like. I think that like Brad here maybe probably going to be a little bit like favored just being on the play, I think, right?
He's on the draw.
Oh, he's going to be on the draw. Okay.
Right, yeah. So he won. Or no, you're right. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I had that mixed up. So yeah, he's going to be a bit very much in control because like I said, Titanshift is kind of a slower deck. So being on the play, now he's like, instead of being like half a turn ahead, being on the draw, now he's like a turn and a half to 2 turns ahead, where like Brandon is really going to be on the back foot for the first couple turns, and if he doesn't do impactful like things, he might just die before he gets to do anything.
Like if I'm Brad, like I'm definitely trying to hold Skullcrack in hand against an opposite.
Yeah, you really want to see. Yeah, you want to see it because like we saw in the last match, where he's like about to lose, and then he's like, oh, I'm going to play this card that gains me life and is going to stabilize me. If you just have Skullcrack, you just win.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you just,
Which we saw in the last one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the card he really wants to see, but you can't really mulligan for it, but I'm pretty sure I see one in his hand.
We did just line up a pretty cool little backup match. So if this game goes quick, I'm hoping it does, because we got a really cool, interesting, like janky homebrew type deck that apparently one of our guys here has that's supposed to be pretty hot.
All right.
So
I hope I get to see that.
Yeah. All right. So Brad obviously started off with the again a Goblin Guide.
Yep.
Classic, perfect. Optimal start for Burn.
Yeah, it's exactly where it wants to be. His opponent led with Mountain, which is a little. I wouldn't say scary, but it's like the best thing he can do. He can threaten like Lightning Bolt and stuff.
Okay.
So, here's that. So we have the trigger Alpha Goblin Guide.
So
finds a land.
I would say it's a good start for Burn, yet he didn't play a land here. I'm wondering if he's going to miss a land drop. Yeah. So he's just on one land.
He's on one land, which isn't great. But usually Burn can run off of one land for a while until it finds its second land. And he has red-white, so he's like pretty set up to, like, if he just draws any land, he's fine.
Brandon getting rid of that Goblin Guide is pretty huge, though, right? Because like I feel like Brad would have been much more comfortable like having the Goblin Guide on board, and then like just the backup of like maybe some one-drop like bolts or like lava spikes and stuff.
Yeah, definitely being on one land. His best play was to like be able to keep that Goblin Guide and be able to like keep the pressure on. But now that he's only on one land with no onboard thing, he's doing like 3 a turn, which is still annoying and still can kill him, but I don't think is enough to put proper pressure on. So, but if he like, obviously he didn't draw a second land there, but if he like this next turn draws a second land, he could still pull this one out.
All right, so Tireless Tracker there from Brandon. Now he's playing a land. He's gonna start getting some clues here. It's a fetch land as well, so this is gonna let him get another clue on a fetch of this land as well, right?
Correct. As long as he doesn't get like killed in response to the fetch, which it doesn't look like it's going to happen. It looks like Brad here is just using Lightning Bolt to pressure his life total.
So is Brandon exposing his hand?
No, that was his graveyard. Gotcha. Yeah. No, they were just discussing life totals.
So, yeah, so Brad basically just saying he's not scared of this Tireless Tracker or the draw ability. He's just like looking to race him here, right?
Yeah, it's not that he's not scared of it. He is, but he doesn't have time to deal with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like being on one land, he can't effectively waste time trying to kill his creatures while his opponent is furthering his game plan. So he like right now he's just gonna say, I'm in do my own thing mode.
So is Brandon going to be able to get out of control with this Tireless Tracker then?
Oh, definitely. I think if he doesn't draw a second land and able to like deal with the tracker and then put pressure on his life total, that this tracker will very quickly kill Brad just by itself, even without anything else.
Tireless Tracker is like a huge favorite of like a bunch of like kind of like one of those like offhanded favorites for a bunch of pros I've noticed. Like whenever I'm like watching like people's streams and stuff, like you see like all these like these guys have been playing the game for 15 years, 20 years and stuff, and they just like absolutely love playing Tireless Tracker.
Yeah, and it's like weird because it's never a card that they're like they always like write articles about and do all this stuff. You know, they're never like, oh man, Tireless Tracker is so powerful. But like every time they're like building a deck and it has any green in it, they're like, yeah, we'll throw Tireless Tracker in there because it's just so much value for doing nothing really.
Yeah.
You just play your lands like you're going to do anyway. There's no reason not to play your lands, and then you're just going to get free draw power and a creature that gets bigger.
Well, and obviously, like in a format that has fetch lands, you're getting much more value out of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're getting tons and tons of value. But even if there wasn't in standard when he was in standard, it was just enough to like play a land and get a clue.
Yeah.
All right, so Brad seems to have found his second land here. He fetched for it, so he's going to take a little bit of damage, which isn't a huge deal. But here's the Thrag Test. But having the second land means that he can Skullcrack in response.
So is
hold on.
The Thrag Test I think is
was that
it's already resolved.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Looks like it. Yeah.
Sorry, I must have missed that.
Gonna attack with the Tireless Tracker. Brad just says sure. I'm taking it. I'm gonna read chat really quick for us here. We got Lillian Bender. What's a solid deck to play regularly at a local game store each week and not be easily hated out? I've only got one deck so far, which is 8-Rack. we talked about that I think like last week or two with it, and have been playing at one store for 3 months now and run into people with a set of white ley lines in the sideboard without white mana, so I'm clearly targeted now. I mean, any deck, like, so, I mean, I think, like I said, I think, like, to be competitive in Modern, like, the main things, like, you want to either have a deck that's, like, very proactive, very aggressive, or have a deck that's going to be able to deal with, like, all possible outcomes or,
right.
You know.
So, I think, to answer your question, I think, right here, you're seeing burn, right? It's relatively cheap, cost-wise. It doesn't really get hated out. There's, what would I say, incidental hate, right? So, like, gaining life is something sometimes you want to do anyway, and gaining life is not really good for you, but it's not something that's, like, gonna completely hate you out like a leyline against 8-rack, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, there are games where your opponent goes, oh, I'm gonna play this thing, gain 3-4 life, and you just still kill them. So, I think this is one of the best, Burn's probably one of the better ones to, like, slog through hate.
And here's another quick thing that I'm going to say, too. Some of the most powerful decks in Modern are decks that are very susceptible to hate cards.
Yes.
So, like, what you'll notice is, like, one of our best players at this store, which everybody here, obviously, in chat that's returning has seen, which is Alexander, playing he plays the Abzan deck.
Yep.
That deck is not necessarily considered, like, the best deck in Modern.
No, not at all.
It's a deck that can play any other deck, and it's maybe doesn't have a lot of hate cards against it, but there might be decks like KCI or Tron or like Storm that are decks that can like seem much more powerful in a vacuum than Jund or than Abzan. But the fact is that those decks all have like very specific hate cards that can shut them down. Whereas in like this deck like Abzan or a deck like Blue-White Control or so we see.
All right, so we'll recap the last couple turns really quick. So. What happened was about 2 turns ago, Brandon played Titan, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get 2 lands. So he was able to trigger that, get 2 lands, untap, and then play Scapeshift. And what Scapeshift did was he sacked, I didn't count exactly, but Brad was at 5, so he didn't even need to be that many. But he was able to sack like 4 lands at least, have a Valakut out, and then just deal like 4 or 5 instances of 3 damage at a time.
Okay.
And as we saw, Brad revealed a Deflecting Palm, and while that would have been good if all of the damage was dealt at once, it's not. It's all separate triggers, so he could have reflected 3 of it, but the rest of it would have went through anyway. So right now we do see Titanshift take it down to be 3-0.
They're gone, right?
Yeah. So I think we're gonna try to get Brandon in here really quick before the next before we get our secondary game started. We are. Okay. I've just been told by our tech guy that we're going straight into the next game as soon as we can get them out of there.